this is Kimberly from Lakeside Loops, and today I'm going to show you how to make my Ryker ribbed knit hat. I normally show you crochet patterns, but today it's knit and I'm so excited. So you will need two 5mm knitting needles, size 8 if you're in the US. You will also need any medium weight yarn, but I used Lion Brand Heartland yarn in Great Smoky Mountains, that's the color. You also need a pair of scissors and a darning needle. That is going to be used to seam the side of our hat or the back of our hat together. So, oh, one more thing, gosh, a pom-pom. I used a faux fur pom-pom, and the details on where I purchased that are on my blog. The full pattern is on my blog, lakesideloops.com. You can find the instructions there for free. They're for you to look at to follow along with this video tutorial. This video is just gonna go over any tricky parts, or to be honest, if you're new to knitting like I am, I'm gonna walk you through every stitch, every step to make sure that you can follow this pattern that's on the blog. All right, so as I said, I'm new to knitting, so hopefully this video tutorial will be helpful to you if you are someone who's a crocheter and you're coming from sort of the crochet world into knitting and wanting to try knitting. Hopefully this video tutorial will be really helpful to you. If you're already a knitter, then this pattern's really basic and you probably don't even need this video tutorial to complete the written pattern. But if you are new, I really hope that this helps you. So step one is to cast on. And in order to cast on, we need to create a knot. And we need to make sure that the tail, this side of our knot, is long enough for us to cast on. So the rule of thumb that I've read is to do 1 inch for every 1 inch for every stitch that you need. So if you're making an adult large like I am, you would need 62 inches on this side of your yarn. So you would sort of start here, measure out however many inches you need, and again 1 inch per stitch seems to be the rule of thumb that I read. Better to have too much of a tail here than not enough. So once you do that, you're going to take your yarn and go like this. So I've got my tail going this way, and then this leads to my ball of yarn. So I'm going to take that and I'm going to twist it. So again, this top loop is going to my tail, this bottom string is going to my ball of yarn, and I'm going to go from behind and put my fingers through, and I'm going to grab this string. So again, I've got my fingers coming through, and I'm going to grab that and pull that loop through, and that's going to create my first stitch. So I'm going to put that on one of my needles. I'm going to tighten it. All right, not too tight. You want to keep these cast on stitches loose, not too tight, not too loose. You want to be able to move them around your needle pretty easily. Now, the way we cast on is we're going to be working with our tail, so all the yarn on this side. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to hold it in my hand like this. I'm going to put my thumb down over top of it, and I'm going to wrap my thumb around it like this. And then I take my needle and I slip it up through. Now I keep my thumb there. I grab my yarn that's going this way towards my ball of yarn, and I wrap it around my needle. Then I take this loop that was on my thumb and I pull it over top of the needle and pull it tight. Not too tight, just tight enough that you've got your stitch on there nice and loose. Okay, so I'm going to show you this again. I'm holding my needle vertically, just one needle, and I've got my tail on my left side and this end that's attached to the ball on my right side. I'm going to take my left hand and hold this yarn, and I'm going to take my thumb and press it down over top. I'm going to wrap the yarn around my thumb. I'm going to take my needle and slide it up into that loop. I'm going to keep my thumb there. I'm going to grab this yarn, I'm going to wrap it around my needle going from the back to the front, and then I'm going to take this loop that was on my thumb and bring it over the top of my needle and then pull it. And that is casting on a stitch. So again, I'm going to go a little faster this time. Grab this, slide my needle up through, wrap that around, throw that over top. So you're going to keep doing this until you have the number of loops on your needle that it says in the pattern. So in my case, with the largest size, I need 62 loops. All right, so if you're chugging along and all of a sudden this end you run out of yarn and you haven't gotten the proper number of loops onto your needle, I'm afraid to tell you you're going to have to start again. So just whip everything off your needle, pull all the yarn apart, and start again with a longer tail. Fortunately, the casting on doesn't take too much time, so it's not too devastating if you find out your yarn end was too short. If you end up with a super long yarn end once you're done casting everything on, I would just tie this in a quick little knot. That way you don't accidentally pick it up and start knitting with it. So just tie a little knot there, and that way you're not going to accidentally grab it and start knitting with it. You can quickly and easily tell that this isn't the yarn you're knitting with. So if you've cast on the right number of stitches, you're going to pick up your second needle and hold it in your right hand. This pattern uses two very basic knitting stitches, the knit stitch and a purl stitch. So this is how I knit. There are different ways to hold your knitting needles. This is what's most comfortable to me, and again, I'm coming from the land of crochet. I've been a crocheter for many years, and knitting is very new to me. I am by no means a pro or an expert. I'm just showing you what works for me. So I've got all of my loops on my hook that's in my left hand, and I have an empty hook here in my right hand. Now the knit stitch, okay, so every row starts with a knit stitch and then switches to a purl, and it just alternates back and forth, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, all the way down. And again, every row starts with a knit stitch. So to work a knit stitch, you need, this is the yarn that's attached to my ball. Again, this is my yarn end, and we're just going to let that hang. We don't need it for anything. We just want to pretend it's not even there. So you're going to take your yarn that's attached to your ball, and I'm going to hold it in my left hand along with my left needle. Again, this is just the way that I do it. Everyone crochets or knits differently. So a knit stitch is with the yarn around the back of my work, so it's not in the front, it's in the back. I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to insert it into the front part of a loop on the left needle. So I'm going to take this needle, and instead of going this way into the loop, I'm going to go this way into the loop. And I'm going to take this yarn that's around the back and I'm going to put it around my right needle. And then I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to use that to pull that yarn through. And this is my new stitch on my right needle. And I'm going to pull this left stitch right here, this guy, off my left needle. Ooh, there we go. That is your first knit stitch. All right, now I'm going to show you a purl stitch. So for a purl stitch, you need your yarn at the front of your hook, or front of your needle, sorry. And instead of inserting your needle this way, you're going to go this way. And then you're going to wrap your yarn around your needle and pull it through. And then slide that left loop off of your left hook. So now we're back to a knit. So we're alternating knit, purl, knit, purl. So again, with a knit, you want your yarn at the back of your needle, and you're going to take your right needle and you're going to go into the stitch this way. Wrap your yarn around and use your right needle to pull it through, and then slide that stitch off the left hook. For a purl, you want your yarn in the front. You're going to slide your needle in this way, there we go. And you're going to wrap your yarn around and use your right needle to pull it through. And then slide that stitch off your left hook. So you can see our stitches are going from our left hook, they're transferring over to our right hook. So that was a purl. Now we're going to do a knit. So again, my yarn's at the back, slide my needle in. And now, sorry, that was a knit, now a purl. You have to stop and slide your stitches forward every once in a while. Now a knit, now a purl. So I'm kind of mostly using my right hook. I'm not really using my left hook, and I think that's because I'm coming from the world of crochet where I use my right hand and I only have a hook, as opposed to being used to having two needles. Now if I ever lose my place, if you look on your right hook, you can see the knit sort of looks like a loop, like a little horseshoe. And the purl has this sort of horizontal line. So I can see my last stitch was a purl, the one before that was a knit, this little guy in here hiding was a purl, a knit, purl, knit. So I can kind of find my place that way. And as you grow your piece, you will very easily be able to see, you know, what's hanging below your needle. You'll be able to see, okay, this one's a knit, this one's a purl, and so on and so on. It's just the first couple of rows that you can kind of lose your place a little bit because it's hard to see. It's not as easy to see what's coming down below your right hook. All right, so once you've worked all of your stitches off your left hook, I'm just going to space them out here and adjust. This right hook is now going to switch, sorry, right needle, I keep saying hook, is going to switch and become your left needle. You're going to hold the yarn in your left hand and you're just going to do the whole thing again. Now this, what was your left needle, is now your right needle. And you may have to stop, like I said, and readjust, push stitches forward or back. If you have to pause and take a break, I always take all of my work and push it to the end of my needle so that nothing accidentally slides off while I'm pausing. Because this hat is so stretchy, your piece is going to seem way too small for the size that you're making. This is the extra large, the largest adult size, and I mean, this is my hand over top of it. It's very small, but it stretches. All right, so I've completed all the necessary rows, and now I'm going to show you how to bind off or cast off. And what this means is we're just going to secure these stitches. We're going to get them off of our needles and make sure that they don't come apart. So what we need to do is work 2 stitches onto our right hook, and we're going to make sure that we're following the same pattern we've been following all along. So a knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So again, going to get 2 loops over here. I'm going to knit my first stitch and purl my second stitch. All right, now that I have 2 loops on this needle, I need to get this loop over top of this one. So I'm going to take my left needle and I'm going to put it into my first loop, and I'm going to take my right needle and I'm going to use that to bring my second loop through my first one, and then I slide that loop that was on my left hook off. So now I've got 1 loop. I've just cast off 1 stitch. Now we're going to cast off another one. So I've got 1 loop on this needle. I need to get a second loop on there. So I can see my next stitch that I need to work is a knit stitch. Now I've got 2 loops on this needle. I'm going to take my left needle, I'm going to insert it into the first loop, and I'm going to use my right needle to pull through the second stitch. Now I've cast off 2 stitches. So I can see my next stitch over here is a purl, so I'm going to purl, and then again I'm going to take my left needle, put it into that first stitch, and use my right stitch to pull it through. So you're just going to continue to do that all the way down your row until all of your stitches are off. All right, so I've gotten to the very end of my row and I've got 1 loop left with nowhere to go. And you might be wondering what to do next. This is what I do. I cut a long end, and then I take my needle and I pull that end up through. And I pull it tight, and now my yarn isn't going anywhere. It can't unravel. Kind of creates a little knot at the end. So now that we've done that, we've finished binding off, and my last row where I've cast off is a lot looser than, sorry, Canadian accent sticking out there. It's a lot looser and a lot less neat than my casting on was. So you can see this is my first row and this is my last row. That's okay if yours is looking the same way, because we're actually going to sew all of this together. This is going to be the top of our hat. So it's not going to matter what your last row looks like. Or if you happen to have a much nicer last row and a bit of a messier first row, then this could be the top of your hat and this could be the part that you fold up. All right, so the next step is to sew our side together to turn our rectangle into a bit more of a cylinder. So this is my first row, over here is my last row, and this is one of the sides of my rectangle. I'm gonna fold over so that I've got both sides together like this. Now I'm going to thread a darning needle. If you're a crocheter, you could also slip stitch the sides together. If you're not a crocheter, I'll show you a trick to thread so a darning needle is just basically a really large needle with a bit of a blunt, and it's not super pointy, and it's for weaving in large threads like yarn. So instead of threading my needle like this, I would probably drive myself crazy trying to get that end in there. I fold my yarn in half like this, and I take this little loop and I take my needle and I just sort of wiggle the loop through the end of my needle. And that seems to be an easier way for me to thread my darning needle. I hope that helps you too. All right, so you can see I've already started a little bit here. I'm just sewing together my two sides. So here's my first row, my last row, and I've joined my sides together, and I'm just sewing them with my darning needle. And again, you could slip stitch, if you're a crocheter, you could slip stitch your side together. Doesn't have to be fancy. All right, so once you've finished your side seam, you basically have a cylinder with two open ends. You're gonna pick your least pretty end. So in my case, that's where I cast off. And I'm going to thread my darning needle again, and I'm just gonna weave in and out all the way around. Maybe every other rib. Maybe even every third rib. Doesn't have to be an exact science. And once we pull this tight, it'll close up the end of our hat for us. And then we can attach a pom-pom to hide the fact that the top is closed. All right, so now that I've done that, I can pull, secure that off, and then attach a pom-pom. And here's another little tip. If you wanted to clean up the top of your hat even more, you see how you have these points here? You could actually weave yarn through each tip, each point. And then pull that closed. And you can see the top of my hat looks even neater. So all that's left to do here is to fold up my brim. And this hat is going to look really, really small. Like this is the largest size and it looks teeny tiny, but it's because it stretches so much. And when you stretch it out, that's my favorite because you can see all your beautiful ribbed work. All right, and that is it for this video tutorial. I really hope that you found it helpful, and maybe if you're new to crochet new to knit like I am, this was a really fun stepping stone for you. This is the knitted hat. I also have a crochet version of this same hat. So if you check out my YouTube channel or my website, lakesidaloops.com, you can find both patterns there for free. The crochet version is also a very beginner friendly pattern. And like I said, I hope this knit one was fun if you're a newbie like I am to knitting.